13 feet down a shaft under the Ramesseum, in a space about 2 feet square, a wooden box lay on its side, 18 inches by 12 by 12, covered in white plaster. On the lid, drawn roughly in black ink, the figure of a jackal. The box was about 1/3 full of papyri, and the man who opened it wrote down what happened when he touched them. If a fragment of the material were pressed slightly between the finger and thumb, it disappeared in a mere dust. Inside that box, in that dust, was the paperwork of a boarder. Not a chronicle, not a royal inscription, not a king telling posterity what he wanted posterity to hear. A pile of copied letters between frontier forts, filed by an office that logged who walked out of the desert, what they were carrying, how many donkeys were with them, what time of day they turned up, and what time of day they were sent back. One of those letters records a patrol coming in from the desert edge to say that they had found the track of 32 men and 3 asses. Somebody wrote that down. Somebody copied it. Somebody filed the copy. And here is the fact: this film is going to spend the next 40 minutes earning. Every single readable date in that file falls inside 12 days. 12 days. Not a reign, not a year, not a season. Under a fortnight of one frontier's paperwork, from one year that nobody bothered to label with the name of a king. That is essentially the whole of what survives of how Egypt ran its Nubian forts on paper, and it has been published in English since 1945, and the number of documentaries ever made about it is 0. If you want the documents that the documentaries never touch, hit subscribe now. This channel reads the documents the documentaries never touch, and it does it every day. The papyrus is catalogued in the British Museum as EA 10752. Egyptologists know it by 2 other names as well, because it has led 3 lives. As an object, it is Papyrus Ramesseum C, one of a library of rolls found in that box. As a text, it is the Semna Despatches. 2 further fragments of the same roll sit under separate numbers, EA 10771 and EA 10772. And one of those fragments spent a century framed with the wrong papyrus. James Edward Quibble found the box in the 1896 season, working for the Egyptian research account on the ground under and around the Ramesseum, the mortuary temple of Ramesses II on the West Bank at Thebes. He published it 2 years later in a volume called simply The Ramesseum. His account of the find is 4 sentences long, and it is worth having exactly as he wrote it. First was a wooden box about 18 by 12 by 12 inches. It was covered with white plaster, and on the lid was roughly drawn in black ink the figure of a jackal. The box was about 1/3 full of papyri, which were in extremely bad condition, 3/4 of their substance having decayed away. Then Quibble writes the sentence that decides the next 50 years. The papyrus was packed with care and has been brought to England. It is too delicate even to be unfolded. Read that again. It is too delicate even to be unfolded. In 1898, the roll could not be opened. Nobody knew what was on it. Quibble hoped in print that Francis Llewellyn Griffith would get at the text by copying what was visible on one fold and then brushing or scraping that away to reach the next. That is the state of the art he was describing. Scrape off the outer layer to read the layer underneath and lose the outer layer forever. So understand what Quibble did and did not find. He found a box. He found reed pens 16 inches long and 1/10 of an inch thick. He found ivory castanets incised with mythical creatures, a bronze uraeus tangled in a mass of hair, a cat and an ape in green glaze, and a handful of beads in amethyst and agate and hematite and carnelian. He did not find the Semna Despatches. Nobody could have. The dispatches were inside a roll that could not be opened, in a box, in a shaft, and they stayed unread for another 47 years. The roll was mounted in 1906. It came to the British Museum in 1956, given by Alan Gardiner and the British School of Archaeology in Egypt. And in between those 2 dates sits the man who actually read it. His name was Paul Cecil Smither, and he never saw the papyrus. He worked from photographs. He was young, he was ill, and there was a war on. He died in September 1943. The edition that carries his name was finished by his editor, Battiscombe Gunn, who wrote the translation and the commentary, with readings added by Gardiner and plates drawn by Smither's wife. It appeared in 1945 in the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology, Volume 31, pages 3 to 10, 8 pages. The article is called The Semna Despatches. 8 pages. Kramer and Liska open their own edition by saying that the evidence for the system of written communications Egypt used to administer its forts is sparse, and that of the papyri which exist, the Semna Despatches, has provided most of the information available about that system in Lower Nubia in the late Middle Kingdom. That is the claim this roll can carry. Not the only one, the one that tells us most. That edition stood, essentially untouched, for 71 years. In 2016, Brian Kramer and Kate Liska published a new edition in the Journal of Egyptian History, 65 pages of it. And they did 2 things Smither could not. They found more of the papyrus, in fragments that had been framed with a different roll and shelved. And they moved it. Smither and Gunn had assumed the register was compiled at Thebes, because Thebes is where it was buried. Kramer and Liska argue it was written in a surveillance office at Semna West, on the frontier itself, and carried north later, which means the file was buried 1,000 kilometers from the office that made it, in a magician's box under a temple, with a jackal on the lid. We do not know why. Gunn's own reading, and it is the honest one, is that the roll survived because somebody wanted the back of it. The dispatches are on the front. Later, somebody turned the roll over and wrote magic on the blank reverse. And it is the magic that got the roll into a lector priest's box and into the ground. The border paperwork was the scrap paper. Egypt's surveillance archive survived as the back of a spell. That is the object. Over the next 7 chapters, this film reads what is on it. Chapter 1, the shape of a dispatch, and the sentence in red ink that appears on almost every one. Chapter 2, the patrol, and the track of 32 men and 3 asses. Chapter 3, the women with the 2 donkeys. Chapter 4, the interrogation at the well. Chapter 5, the desert is dying of hunger. Chapter 6, the distribution list. And who was reading all of this? Chapter 7, 12 days, 7 chapters, 1 roll, under a fortnight of a frontier. Every bureaucracy has a sentence it cannot stop writing. This one has 3, and the first of them is written in red, as one fortress sending to another fortress. That clause, or something very close to it, heads dispatch after dispatch on this roll. It is a filing tag. It tells the clerk what kind of document he is holding. Not a royal order coming down, not a petition going up, but lateral traffic, fort to fort. The Egyptian frontier in Nubia was not a wall. It was a network of garrisons that wrote to each other, and this roll is a register of that correspondence, copied out and kept. The second recurring sentence is the closing. All the affairs of the king's domain are safe and sound. All the affairs of the master are safe and sound. May the hearing of the master be good. The third is the phrase that follows almost every reference to a superior, and it is so routine that Egyptologists abbreviate it, rather than write it out. Life, prosperity, health. It attaches to the king's domain, to the master, to the great house. It is the ancient equivalent of a formal salutation, and it costs the scribe nothing. Gunn noticed something about that closing formula, and it is the kind of detail that only comes from a man who has read everything else. The assurance about the master is normal Middle Kingdom letter writing. The assurance about the king's domain is not. Gunn calls it quite unusual, and he says where else he found it. 2 letters, one from the 18th dynasty, one from the 20th. Both of them addressed to viceroys of Nubia. So whoever was receiving these dispatches was being written to the way you write to the man who runs Nubia. We do not know who he was. The opening of the roll is gone. Every page of this papyrus is missing at least 3 lines off the top, which is why the modern edition numbers the topmost surviving line of a page not as line 1, but as line X+1. That notation is an admission. It means there were lines above this, and we cannot count them. The man is referred to throughout as the master. The officers writing in call themselves this servant. Nobody signs the file. Now the shape of a single dispatch, because the shape is the story. Take the 4th dispatch on the roll. It opens with a heading in red ink, and the red survives well enough that Gunn set it in capitals in his edition to show you where the color changed. Letter which was brought to him from the retainer Ameni, who is in the fortress Kesef Medjau, as one fortress sending to another fortress. Then Ameni writes, "It is a communication to the master about the fact that 2 guardsmen came to report to this servant in year 3, month 4 of Proye, day 2, at the time of breakfast." Note what has just happened. Ameni is not reporting an event. Ameni is reporting that 2 men reported an event, and he is timing their arrival to the meal. Then the 2 guardsmen speak, Inside Emini's letter, they are reporting on business of a citizen whose name and whose father's name and whose grandfather's name are all given, and who stood in for the beneficiary of the ruler's table in the troops of Mayhem. And what they say is that the patrol, which went out to walk the desert edge in year 3, month 3 of Proye, on the last day of the month, came to report to them. And then, 4 layers down, the patrol itself speaks. We have found the track of 32 men and 3 asses which they have trodden. That is a report, inside a letter, inside a copy of a letter. Count it again. The register copies Emini. Emini quotes the guardsman. The guardsmen quote the patrol. The patrol describes the sand. The men who actually walked out to the desert edge and looked at the ground are 4 quotation marks away from the page you can read today. That is not a bureaucratic accident. That is what a chain of custody looks like when it is working. The Egyptians who ran this frontier had built a machine for turning a footprint into a filed document, and the machine had at least 4 moving parts, and every part of it was required to say who told it and when. The desert edge was walked. The walkers reported. The reporters reported. The report was copied. The copy was filed. Chapter 1 closes on the sentence that heads the file, as one fortress sending to another fortress. The word for the patrol is a problem, and it is worth 30 seconds because it is a good lesson in what reading a damaged language is actually like. Smither read a word in these dispatches for the unit that walked the desert edge. He could not find that word anywhere else. In his own footnote, he says, "It seems, like the verb from which it is evidently derived, to be unknown outside this papyrus, and that the reading, and therefore the phonetic value, are quite uncertain." Sit with that. The word for the thing this entire film is about occurs, so far as Smither could establish, on 1 roll of papyrus and nowhere else in the language. We know roughly what they did. We do not know what they were called, or how the word sounded in the mouth. The German edition in the Berlin Thesaurus, translated by Ingelor Hofmann, renders it as border watch and puts its own question mark on it. 2 translators, 2 languages, 1 shared uncertainty, both of them honest enough to print it out. So this film will call them the patrol, and you should know that the word is a modern convenience. What the patrol did is not in doubt. They went out along the desert edge. They looked for tracks. They counted what made them: 32 men, 3 donkeys. Both translations agree on those numerals, digit for digit, and they are 2 independent readings made 70 years apart in different languages. When Smither and Hafmann agree on a number, the number is as solid as anything on this roll gets. Then, the patrol followed the tracks. Chapter 2 closes on the patrol's own line. We have found the track of 32 men and 3 asses. The first dispatch on the roll is about shopping. It is broken at the top like everything else, and it starts mid-sentence, in the middle of something about tracks, and a report written in the evening of month 4 of Proye, day 7. Then men come in to report, and what they say is this: "We found the Nubian women had gone in charge of 2 strong asses." Smither read an adjective there and marked it with a question mark. Hofmann read the sentence differently and has the women walking behind 2 donkeys. The donkeys are certain. The number 2 is certain. Whether the animals were strong or merely in front is not, and no film should pretend otherwise. What is certain is who these people were and what they did next, because the fortress logged it. Nubians arrived at the fortress in year 3, month 4 of Proye, day 7, at the time of evening, to do trade. What they had brought was traded. Then they sailed upstream to the place whence they had come, bread and beer having been given to them. In year 3, month 4 of Proye, day 8, at the time of morning. Arrived in the evening, traded, fed, gone by morning. The fortress is named in the text, and the name is a small piece of theater. It is called Kakare is Mighty. Kakare is the throne name of Senusret III, the king who built out this frontier. And in the dispatch, the name of the fortress carries the epithet the Egyptians attached to a dead king. The fort is named after a pharaoh who was already in his tomb when this clerk wrote the entry. The people who came to trade were dealing with a building named after a corpse. Then the entry continues, and this is where the register stops sounding like a story and starts sounding like a spreadsheet. 6 other Nubians arrived at the fortress Kakore is Mighty to do trade like this, in month 4 of Proye, day 8. What they had brought was traded. They sailed upstream to the place whence they had come on this day. 6 people, same fort, same day, same 3 verbs, arrived, traded, went back. If you had been standing on the wall of Semna, on the morning of month 4 of Proye, day 8, you would have watched 2 separate parties of foreigners come in off the river, do business under supervision, take bread and beer, and be escorted back the way they came, and you would have understood that not one of them was going any further north. That is the frontier policy, and it is not an inference. It is what Gunn concluded from these lines, and he tied it directly to the royal boundary stelae Senusret III set up at Semna. Those stelae are separate objects with separate accession numbers, and they must not be confused with this papyrus. The smaller of them in Berlin carries the royal command that a Nubian who had come to trade, or who was on official business, is permitted to pass north, and that no boats and no herds and no flocks of the Nubians pass the frontier in any case. The stela is the law. The papyrus is the enforcement log. One of them is a king announcing a rule to eternity in carved stone. The other is a clerk writing down that 6 people bought something and left. There is one more detail in the trading entries, and it is the one that changes the temperature. Bread and beer having been given to them, the traders were fed. Egypt's frontier procedure for foreigners who came to do business was to supervise the business, provision them, and walk them back to the boundary. Whatever else this was, it was administered. Chapter 3 closes on the clock. They arrived in the evening, and they were gone by the morning. Before the 4th chapter, the place, because the place explains the paperwork. Semna sits in Lower Nubia, in what is now northern Sudan, in a stretch of river, the Arabic name of which is the Batn el-Hajar, the belly of stone. Bare granite ridges, gullies, blown sand, and a river course that narrows. At Semna, a bar of hard rock crosses the Nile and forces the whole river through a constriction. That constriction is the reason for everything else in this film. A boat coming north out of Kush had to work its way through a narrows overlooked from both banks, so the Egyptians put a fort on the west bank and a second fort on the east bank directly opposite it, and the 2 of them face each other across the water, Semna west and Kuma. They close the river the way a gate closes a road, and they are 2 of a chain. Downstream lies Semna south, Uranardi on its island, Shalfak on its hilltop, Askut on another island, Mirgisa with a harbor and a boat slipway more than 2 kilometers long, Dabanardi on the island opposite it, and Buhen at the second cataract, which is the largest of the northern group and the most thoroughly dug. Counts of the whole system vary depending on where you stop counting, and the honest figure is a chain of more than a dozen fortresses strung along roughly 60 kilometers of river. The building of them is a 2-stage answer, and popular accounts get it wrong in both directions. The fortified presence in the Semna area begins under Senusret I in the earlier 12th dynasty push south. The fortress complex in the form archaeologists actually excavated belongs to the Great Southern Expansion under Senusret III. There is one more thing cut into the rocks at Semna and Kuma, and it is not a fort and it is not a stela. Watermarks. Something like 27 records of exceptionally high Nile floods inscribed on the rock in the 12th and 13th dynasties, with a concentration under Amenemhat III. In the 12th dynasty examples, the height of the water is marked by a horizontal line drawn straight through the first sign of the inscription. The flood heights they record are far above anything the modern river reaches, and Egyptologists and geologists have argued for over a century about why. Climate or a rock barrier downstream that has since eroded away, we do not know. This film will not pick one. But the marks do prove something the Despatches only imply. Somebody was standing at that gorge, year after year, rain after rain, writing down measurements. Semna was a place where Egyptians recorded things, on rock and on paper. Now the 4th chapter, and the interrogation. The 3rd dispatch is the richest thing on the papyrus, and it is the one that shows the whole operation running end to end. It comes from an officer whose title the Egyptians wrote as Overseer of the Shenette, which the German edition renders as Police Overseer. His name was Sebekwar. The English word Smither chose for that title cannot be recovered, because the only scan of that page we could read is damaged at exactly that word. Sebekwar writes that 2 guardsmen and 70 Medjay people who went following that track in month 4 of Proye, day 4, came back to report on the same day at the time of evening. 70 is Smither's reading, and Smither put a question mark on it. Carry the question mark. They came back having brought in 3 Medjay men, and 4, and the number 4 in that sentence has no noun attached to it, because the papyrus is broken at exactly that point. The German edition restores the missing word as children. The number is secure. The word is a modern guess. They were found, the report says, on the south of the desert edge, below the inscription of Shomu. Below the inscription, the patrol is giving a location by reference to a piece of writing already carved on the rock. The desert had landmarks, and the landmarks were texts. And then the officer questions them, and the interrogation is in the file, in direct speech, in his own voice. Whence have you come? Then they said, we have come from the well of Yebhayet. Then he wrote about them to the fortresses to the north. That is the entire procedure in about 40 words of surviving text. Find the track, follow the track, bring in the people at the end of it. Ask them one question. Write to the neighbors. Nobody is killed in this document. Nobody is enslaved in it. There is no battle anywhere on this roll. 70 people go out into the desert after a set of footprints and come back with 7 human beings and 1 sentence about a well. And the sentence about the well is the part that gets written down and sent north. The Egyptian frontier in Nubia, in the only week of it we can actually read, is not fighting anybody. It is asking them where they came from and filing the answer. Chapter 4 closes on the question, whence have you come? The 5th dispatch is the one that does not read like paperwork, and it is the reason this roll is worth an hour of anyone's time. It comes from Elephantine, which is the one fortress on this papyrus whose identification nobody disputes, at the First Cataract, the traditional southern edge of Egypt proper. The heading is in red, copy of a document which was brought to him, being one brought from the fortress of Elephantine, as one fortress sending to another fortress. Then the officer writes, be informed of the fact that 2 Medjay men, 3 Medjay women, and 2 came down from the desert in year 3, month 3 of Proye, day 27. The sentence has a hole in it. After 2, the noun is gone. The German edition supplies children. 2 men, 3 women, and 2 of something the papyrus no longer says. 7 people came out of the desert and walked up to an Egyptian fort. They said, we have come to serve the great house. The great house is Perah, the words that 4 centuries later become the word Pharaoh. They were asking for work from the Egyptian state. A question was put regarding the condition of the desert. Understand what that question is. This is an intelligence debrief. 7 starving people present themselves at a fort asking for employment, and the officer's first move is to ask them what is going on out there. Then they said, we have heard nothing at all, but the desert is dying of hunger. That line is the center of this document, and it is safe. Smithers English and Hoffmann's German say the same thing, independently, 70 years apart. The desert is dying of hunger. Die Wüste stirbt infolge des Hungers. 2 translators, 2 languages, no daylight between them. The desert is dying of hunger. That is a sentence spoken by a Medjay person on the southern frontier of Egypt, in a specific year, in a specific month, on a specific day, written down by the officer who heard it, copied into a register, buried in a box, and read again 4,000 years later. And then this servant caused that they be dismissed to their desert on this day. They were sent back. Same day. 7 people who had walked in out of a famine to offer their labor to the Egyptian state were turned around and returned to the country they had just told the officer was dying. Gunn saw exactly what that meant and wrote it plainly. Those southerners who came to trade were sent back to their homes when the trading was completed, and the Medjay people who announced that they had come to work for the Egyptian government were dismissed to their desert. It is thus clear that as a rule they were not allowed to pass the frontier. That is the policy, stated by the man who edited the text, from the text, and then the file records something it had no bureaucratic reason to record. One of these Medjay women speaks. Here, the 2 translations pull apart, and a documentary is not allowed to pick one and move on. Smithers English has her asking for a man. Oh, let me be given my Medjay man in this. Hoffmann's German runs the grammar the other way and has her asking to be given to her man. Oh, if only I were given to my husband. The words are the same words. The direction is opposite. One reading is a woman asking that a man be given to her. The other is a woman asking to be sent to him. We do not know which she said. What we know is that a woman who had just been refused passage said something about a man in the moment she was being sent back into a famine, and that an Egyptian officer, filing a routine security report to another fort, wrote it down. Then the Medjay man answers her, and his line is broken. Does one who trades bring himself? Smithers' own footnote on it is 1 word longer than the fragment, quite obscure in the absence of the words which followed. The last thing these 2 people say to each other is unreadable. Chapter 5 closes on the line that is not, the desert is dying of hunger. So who is this being written for? The 6th dispatch answers that, and it answers it in the most ordinary way imaginable. At the bottom of the entry, in red ink, There is an endorsement and then a list. The endorsement says that an acknowledgement of this letter has been made in a letter which has been sent to him about the Nubians who arrived at the fortress Kakare is Mighty in month 4 of Proye, day 7 at the time of evening, and were sent back to the place whence they had come in month 4 of Proye, day 8 at the time of morning. Stop on those dates. Day 7 in the evening, day 8 in the morning, those are the same 2 timestamps as the first dispatch. This is the same arrival and the same departure written up a second time, in a different letter, filed on a different page of the same roll. The register is cross-referencing itself, which means one of 2 things, and both of them are interesting. Either 2 different offices reported the same 6 traders independently, or the file is deliberately keeping the acknowledgement next to the original. Either way, somebody in this system cared that the arrival and the departure could be tied together on paper. And then the list, copied in a letter which has been sent to. 3 names follow, each with a title, each with a posting. The judge, Mouth of Heracompolis, Simontu. The city administrator, Amanier. The high steward, Senameri. Gunn's footnote on that list is 6 words that tell you what the whole roll is. The letter was of interest to 3 other fortresses and was therefore circulated among them. Circulated. 6 Nubians came to a fort, traded, and went home, and the paperwork about it went to a judge, a city administrator, and a high steward at 3 separate garrisons. This is a distribution list. It is the oldest one this channel has read, and it is doing exactly what a distribution list does today. A thing happened. Here is who needs to know. Here are their names and their postings. Copy them in. Chapter 6 closes on Gunn's word, circulated. Now the last chapter, and it is the one that reframes everything you have just heard. Go back through the dates. The Medjay come out of the desert on month 3 of Proye, day 27. The patrol walks out of Kisef Medjau on the last day of month 3. The track of 32 men is reported on month 4 of Proye, day 2, at breakfast. The 2 guardsmen and the 70 Medjay set off after that track on day 4. The traders arrive on the evening of day 7 and leave on the morning of day 8, and 6 more arrive and leave on day 8, and the endorsement in the 6th dispatch recapitulates day 7 and day 8 all over again. Now count the span. An Egyptian civil month is 30 days. From the 27th of one month to the 8th of the next is 12 days. 12 days. Every securely readable date on this papyrus falls inside 12 consecutive days of a single year 3. That is the archive. That is what we have. The register of an entire frontier system. The papyrus that carries most of what is known about how that system worked on paper. And it is under a fortnight long. 2 hedges on that, immediately, because this is exactly where a documentary would cheat. The 12 days are the span of what survives, not the span of what was written. The roll is broken at both ends. Every page is missing at least 3 lines off the top. And the 9th dispatch was sitting in a frame with a different papyrus for 100 years. The original register plainly ran longer. The honest sentence is that the surviving dates cluster inside 12 days, not that the archive covers 12 days, and the entries cross-reference each other, so the events cannot simply be added up. Day 7 and day 8 appear on 3 separate dispatches, and they are the same evening and the same morning. Say the count properly, and say whose count it is. Smither and Gunn numbered 8 dispatches in 1945, and said flatly that no one of these missives is preserved complete. Kramer and Liska in 2016 recovered a further one from the fragments that had been misshelved, and the database that indexes it now catalogs that last piece as Dispatch 9 plus X. 9 plus X. The letter X is doing real work in that catalog entry. It means the editors know the series does not stop there, and they cannot say how much further it went. Chapter 7 closes on the number, 12 days, and every one of them borrowed from a file that was longer. Here is what this roll overturns, and it is not what you would expect, because the thing it overturns is not an ancient idea. It is a modern one, and the man who wrote it down was the same man who translated the text. In 1945, Batiscombe Gunn read these dispatches and found them puzzling. His own words. The dispatches deal with the comings and goings of Nubians who came to Semna to trade their wares, and Medjay people, and mention more than once the steps taken to keep track of the movements of these southerners in the desert. It is surprising that it should have been thought necessary to report such trivial activities officially to higher authorities and to other fortresses. Trivial activities. That is a first-rate philologist, holding the only frontier register to survive from ancient Egypt, and finding its contents beneath the dignity of the filing effort. In 2016, Kramer and Liska read the same text and drew the opposite conclusion. Their reading is that the dispatches were used, primarily, to coordinate surveillance around the Semna Gorge, and secondarily, to record security concerns for other fortresses. The trivia was the point. Gunn was measuring the file against what he thought an ancient state would consider worth writing down. Kramer and Liska measured it against what a surveillance operation actually produces, which is an enormous volume of individually meaningless entries whose value is entirely in the aggregate. 6 traders in and out on day 8 is trivia. 6 traders in and out on day 8, logged, timed, cross-referenced against a track count from day 2, and circulated to 3 garrisons, is intelligence. The British Museum's own label now takes the second reading. The texts show that the Egyptians carefully monitored the movement of people and controlled trading activities. What changed between 1945 and 2016 was not the papyrus. It was that the world acquired surveillance systems of its own and learned to recognize one on sight. Now, the honest weighing, and there are 3 columns to it. What is established? The papyrus exists and is in the British Museum. The text is copied inter-fortress correspondence. It logs arrivals, departures, patrol results, interrogations and dismissals, with dates and times of day. Foreigners who came to trade were supervised, provisioned, and sent back the way they came. People who asked to work for the Egyptian state were refused and returned. Documents were circulated to named officials at other garrisons. The word for the patrol occurs nowhere else in the language. What is contested? Almost every place name on the roll. The identification of the fortresses beyond Elephantine is argued over, and one excavator managed to contradict himself inside a single volume about which ruin was Semna. The number 70 carries Smithers' question mark. 2 nouns that a documentary would love to say out loud are modern restorations of holes in the papyrus. A woman's sentence is translated in 2 opposite directions by 2 competent scholars. And the king is contested, because the king is absent. This is the part that stops the film from telling you a clean story. The dispatches date themselves to year 3. Year 3 of nobody. No royal name appears anywhere on this roll. Not once. 2 positions exist. Smither and Gunn's edition, and the reference databases that follow it, place the file in the reign of Amenemhat III. The British Museum and the Leipzig database date the manuscript instead to the 13th dynasty. And there is a 13th dynasty king, Sekemre Kutawi Sobekotep, who left Nile-level marks at Semna in his 2nd and 3rd years, which is the closest concrete match anybody has for a year 3 at this fort. You will also find Senusret III given as the answer. He is not one of the 2 positions. That attribution appears on Wikipedia, and we could find no scholarly support for it. It is a confusion between the king who built the forts and the king the document declines to name. The most recent edition of the text says only that it belongs to the late Middle Kingdom, and leaves it there. We do not know which king's 3rd year this was. That is not a gap in the scholarship. It is a property of the document. This is a working file, written by people who had no reason to put the king's name on an internal memo about 6 traders in a donkey track, in exactly the way that nobody dates an office email by the head of state. The absence of the king is the strongest evidence that this file is real. There is one more thing to weigh, and it belongs to the modern half of the story rather than the ancient one. The English translation that almost everybody quotes, including this film, was made by a man who never saw the papyrus, from photographs, during a war, while he was dying. Paul Smither was 30 when he died, in September 1943. The edition came out 2 years after that, finished by Battiscombe Gunn, with readings added by Alan Gardner and the plates of the hieratic drawn by Smithers' wife. Then it sat 71 years, 1 edition, 8 pages. That is the neglect, and it needs no dressing up. There is no cover-up here, and nobody suppressed anything. The Semna Despatches were published in a leading journal in a major language, and then, for the better part of a century, almost nobody went back to them. The 2 fragments that turned out to hold a 9th dispatch were not hidden. They were framed with the wrong papyrus and put on a shelf, and the shelf was in the British Museum the entire time. Nobody looked in the next frame along for 100 years. The scholarship is now moving. Kramer and Liska's edition runs to 65 pages against Smithers' 8, and it corrects the place of writing, adds a dispatch, and reads a personal name in the first entry that Smither could not. Urinardi and Shalfak, 2 of the forts in this system, are back under excavation, the first from 2012 and the second from 2017. But the 2 that this document is named for are gone. The Aswan High Dam filled, and Lake Nubia rose over the second cataract, and Semna and Kuma are under it. Not ruined, not eroded, submerged. The granite narrows where the Nile was forced through a gap, which is precisely why somebody put a fort there in the first place, is at the bottom of a reservoir before the water came. The temples at Semna and at Kuma were cut apart and moved. They were re-erected in the garden of the Sudan National Museum in Khartoum, along with the temple from Buhen. They stood there for decades and they were photographed. The Sudan National Museum was looted between 2023 and 2025. Reports put the losses at around 60% of the collection, and the grounds were mined. What condition those 3 re-erected temples are in today is not reported. We do not know. This film is not going to tell you they are safe, and it is not going to tell you they are destroyed, because nobody has published either. So the fort that logged every arrival is under a lake, and the temple they carried out of it ahead of the water is in a garden nobody can currently walk into, and the roll of paper that recorded 12 days of the traffic is in a case in room 65 in London, and it is the only one of the 3 you can go and look at. The paperwork outlasted the building. It outlasted the river crossing. It outlasted the country that built it and the museum that rescued it. Somebody in a mud brick office on a granite gorge wrote down that 2 guardsmen came in at breakfast to say the patrol had found the track of 32 men and 3 asses. Somebody copied it. Somebody sent the copy to 3 other forts, and 4,000 years later, that copy is the reason we know that on one specific morning at the southern edge of Egypt, a woman who had walked out of a famine asked an officer for something about her husband and was sent back into the desert before the day was out. The desert is dying of hunger. That is one document. There is one of these every day. Subscribe and you will not miss the next one.